you guys doing out there? This is History 1510, Jamestown Community College. We're moving now into our second unit. This lecture will commence Chapter 7, which means the reading assignment is Chapter 7. There's actually a quiz for Chapter 6 that's, at least as of while I'm speaking, still available. It'll close at 8:30 a.m. on September 29th. Then there will be a quiz for Chapter 7 that will be available. Keep in mind, I also have some current events articles posted for you. There's one per week, so you should now read the second of the 4 current events articles. Once we get through those 4, we have another unit exam. The Unit 1 exam has now been graded, so please check your grade. Graded those over the weekend. I have not yet factored in the up to 5 points in extra credit for participation and attendance. A little bit harder with the asynchronous group, that's you, because we're not doing this real time. I really need to get into the discussion boards and evaluate them. Right? So unlike a Zoom class or an in-person class, both of which I also have, it's easier to judge participation. But with you folks, it's a little harder because we're asynchronous. So you might earn a few more points, certainly no more than 5 points. And look, you really have needed to have posted for every time I put a thread up in something substantive, something more than just a couple of words. Okay? So that's worth up to at least 5 points. The tests have been graded, as I noted, probably not as well as you might have hoped. Let me just put it out there. There was 1A thus far. I mean, I had a few more points, right? So there might be a couple people bumping up, but thus far, 1A, 5 B's, 2 C's, 3 D's, and 5 F's. F means under 60%, and look, if you were in the 30s, you weren't alone. There were a couple students, actually several students, in the 30 percentile, which means it's really not college level work. You need to talk to me, you need to talk to your advisor. We need to really be honest with the expectations of a course like this. They're difficult, I realize it. Asynchronous courses require a whole heck of a lot of self-discipline. You can't only watch the video. There's not enough in these videos. Okay? We're doing world history. We're doing 5,000 years of world history. You can't do that in whatever, 30 YouTube segments. Okay? You really need to get the text and read the text. Read the text before the video. The video should dovetail and overlap with the text, and then review. You got to layer the learning. If you're really not in a place where you can do this, you need to talk to me, talk to an advisor, and figure out if you should stay in this course, frankly, or if you can give up some other things. Right? So a lot more self-discipline is required for the asynchronous courses. The upside of that is you can kind of do this whenever you'd like, right? So if I do have students, believe me, I know it's tough. Kids are home from school, depending on the district. They're Zooming while you're trying to do your homework. I get it. But we really need to find some time to make school one of the top, let's say, 4 or 5 priorities, okay? I've had to do it myself, right? I'm doing graduate work myself, teaching, I have a child at home, making the adjustment to the online world myself, so I get it, we're all busy, right? But we need to maybe up the self-discipline a little bit, or if that's not possible, if you feel like you're really disciplined in doing the work, still not making a grade, we got to talk and see what we can do, because a couple 30% grades out of 4 exams plus the quizzes, it's not going to be a passing grade for the whole semester, right? So take the test seriously. When you have a week to do an exam, there's a lot expected, okay? And that's the amount of time we all had to do these. All right, well, the next exam will be 4 questions from the textbook and lecture, and 1 from current events. I wish I could have put this one on the current events list, but it just popped up this evening. Trump's taxes show chronic losses in years of tax avoidance. What is my source? Is it credible? Well, yeah, actually it's the New York Times, which does not publish, might be opinionated over on this side with editorial, but the facts are, okay, and they're looking at primary sources, tax returns, that the president apparently paid about $750 in 2016 in federal income taxes. I paid 20 times that in my tax returns probably that year, okay? I'm just a lowly community college salary. So, Either the president doesn't have all the money he's claimed he has, or it's been somehow getting out of paying the taxes. So we will find out. Depending on when you watch this, there's going to be a debate Tuesday night, and I'm sure this is a gift to Joe Biden, right? New York Times has been sitting on this. There's the bias, right? They didn't, I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, but they didn't report this when they figured, oh, they're going to wait, until a month before the election and kind of drop this or whatever we are, 5 weeks before the election. All right, so check that out sometime. Again, this is not opinion. This is based upon objective evidence. So we'll see what the president says about it. That'll be interesting. So pay attention to that. Anyway, also pay attention to chapter 7. When we didn't have presidents, but we did have taxes. Poor segue into chapter 7, but the empires of Persia. So we're looking at classical Iran, but big Iran, stretching from northwest India to the borders of Greece. Which didn't really have borders because the Greeks were city-states, but you might know what I mean once I put up a map. Why don't I do that right now? So Persia is going to create a huge empire about 2,500 years ago, stretching, yes, from the Ionian Sea, the Ionian coast, into the Indus River Valley. Keep in mind, by this time, there's no Harappan civilization anymore. The Aryans have already moved in and begun to settle and intermingled with the Dravidians and our farming, right? But it'll stretch from India through what we erroneously call the Middle East, into even Egypt. So, huge empire. Questions are, how do you govern it, okay? Without Twitter, without drones, without roads. Well, actually, they did have roads, okay? And one of the main ones goes from the Ionian coast to Susa, to the center. Actually, it would be extended to Persepolis eventually, right? This would be the capital, Persepolis, and the governors will receive messages from the ruler who's usually here, right? Sending out messages, need reinforcements, or I need more soldiers, or, here's some food because I know there's drought in your region, famine, whatever, right? Sending messages along these roads. That was the best thing they had, right? It's no, 5G speed on your smartphone, but it's the fastest they had. It was actually a Pony Express system. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So classical Persia, when are we in time? 2,500 years ago until about 2,300 years ago. Or, let me do the math here. 2,200 years ago. Sorry, looking at my numbers. You can figure it out, right? Great expanse. They solved administrative challenges by building roads. And it was almost a Pony Express system on these roads. Here's a message. Ride until your horse is tired. Get another horse. Ride until you're tired. Hand off the messages to another messenger and keep going. Okay. Central government. So the ruler is going to be based essentially in the middle, actually the southern middle, below the desert, and put trusted people in charge of states. He would ultimately, I think, 23 states, or satrapies they were called, and no one's elected as governor. The ruler puts you in charge. It says, collect taxes for me, send me soldiers when I need them, administer my laws, basically govern things in that state because I'm far away. And I'm going to send inspectors every year to check up on you. Right? So there's royal audit. So there's a central government with regional states. There's trade throughout this vast empire. Many goods, many peoples, many ethnic groups and languages, religions. Agricultural surplus. In fact, if there's more food in one area, not enough, you can now move it because it's all within the same country. And it was very cosmopolitan. And this is something at least the early founders of the Persian Empire respected. Look, they weren't woke dudes from the 21st century. Okay, when I say they were progressive in their multiculturalism, I'm talking about 2,500 years ago. But there was a respect for human rights. People served in the government regardless of skin tone, language, religious background, or where they came from in the empire. Now, they were all men, okay, so there was a gender bias. And probably a class bias as well, right, because you had to have education, and to be educated you need to be wealthy, but there was not this ethnic discrimination, or religious discrimination, as we will see in other societies, well, especially the Greeks. The Greeks didn't like you if you weren't from their hometown, okay? If you came from another city-state, you were suspect. You couldn't vote. You didn't have rights because you weren't born in the same town. So the Greeks, for all of their achievements, tended to be really provincial in their outlook. Okay? Really kind of like, if you're not from Athens, we don't want to talk to you type thing. Okay? Exaggerating a little bit. So The synonym let me say not synonym, the opposite to provincialism, let's just use some common words here. The opposite of provincialism is cosmopolitanism. So you'd rather be called cosmopolitan than provincial. Provincial is like you only watch the TV news that your grandfather watches, okay? Cosmopolitan is you have friends of many different backgrounds, abilities, skin tones. Or at least, look, if you live in a small town, maybe that's difficult. But at least you're open to those diverse influences. You're not prejudiced. Classical Persia will be influential to religions. We're going to see a new religion kind of evolve in Persia called Zoroastrianism that will have influence, historians would argue, on Jewish, Christian, and eventually Muslim faiths. Iran today, one could argue, okay, you can do some research on Iran today, different outlook, okay. Iran today, not noted as home to great cosmopolitanism and diversity of religions. Let me just put it that way. Who establishes this empire? Well, the Achaemenids. This is the last name. It's the Achaemenid dynasty, so this is the last name of the family, so to speak, about 2,500 years ago. Where did they come from? Where did the Persians come from? They're part of that Indo-European migration. From the north, southward, coming down with my horse, okay, in my wheel and my iron, and looking for greener pasture, and eventually marrying the local someone, maybe just one person, okay, the local woman in my case, and having children. So there's a mixture of people. They call themselves probably not pronouncing correctly, but think the Iranians, okay, and their cousins were the Aryans, and their cousins end up over there called the Irish, okay. It's Ir, means the noble ones in Proto-Indo-European, an early Indo-European language. Okay. They had steppe equestrian skills, so they came from kind of the rolling hills of Ukraine and southern Russia, and they were great horseback riding people. In time, the Persian, you can even say tribe, came to control their cousins, the Medes. That's the start of a kingdom. And again, about 2,500 years ago, the Persians then conquered the Chaldeans, who show up in the Christian Old Testament as the Neo-Babylonians, and probably in the Hebrew Tanakh as well as the Old Babylonians. And if you recall weeks ago, when I said there were Jewish people in Babylon held captive by Nebuchadnezzar, by the Chaldean ruler, Cyrus is the guy who lets them go home. Conquers the Chaldeans, says, who are you people? We're the Jewish people. What do you believe? We believe in Yahweh. We believe in the Ten Commandments and all that other stuff we talk about. Oh, how would you like to go back home? You've been here for 50 years. Maybe it's not even back home, right? For all of you, you would have been born in Babylon, but your parents or grandparents were from Judah. You can go back home. You're not going to have your own kingdom again. It'll be part of my empire, but you can worship Yahweh. Hell, I'll even help you to rebuild your temple to Yahweh. Wow, you're great, Cyrus. Thank you very much. Okay? But you got to pay your taxes. You have to follow my laws, and you can't rebel. Those are the 3 rules. And the same thing for people of Egypt, or Greek people over there, or let's say Hindu people over here. Look, believe what you want, keep it to yourself, and let's just follow the laws, get along. Okay? Don't rebel. Seems like a simple plan. So Cyrus founds an empire. Look, how else could you do this? I mean, we're going to pray. Historians always praise Cyrus, but how could you do this? You have all these different peoples, all these different ethnic groups and societies. You can try to smash everyone to do your will, but they're going to rebel, right? They're not going to be productive. Isn't it better to tolerate or even appreciate diversity? Aren't people going to be more productive? Isn't that going to add wealth to your nation? Well, this is what Cyrus figured out. Right? Actually even issues an edict. This is an emperor or a monarch's pronouncement, in this case of human rights, that human rights should be respected. The earliest document of human rights in world history comes from this time and this culture. So, from our standpoint, we might not see it as that tolerance. There's going to be a video here in a few minutes. They say, well, Cyrus was kind of not the nicest guy. For 2,500 years ago, we would have thought he was nice. Maybe for the 21st century, not so much, right? But let's give the guy a break. Right? Pushed against that zeitgeist that he was in. So, built an empire on tolerance and sophistication. Darius his son extended the empire. Oh, there's going to be war. It's not all Mr. Nice Guy stuff. Has the 23 satrapies. I wonder if that has an Indo-European origin, because it does sound like states, right? States. Etat state. Etat, okay, we'll see. Royal audit, so yes. I put you in charge of those states, and I'm going to send inspectors every year to check up on you. Make sure you're not paying only $750 a year. Are you kidding me? For your taxes? No, to make sure you're not pocketing the tax revenue. You're actually sending it to me so I can build roads and have an army. And gosh, along these roads were kind of sort of motels, right? Inns, or caravanserais they were called, where like a trader or merchant could, at the end of a day's journey, sleep and tie up his horse or his donkey. I don't know, camels being used, yes, by this time. Camels in Arabia, part of this world camels were being used. So you could get something to eat and sleep and then go on to the next day's journey, be another inn. So it's actually pretty sophisticated. Standard coinage, so one currency throughout the empire. You don't have to change your money every time you go to another state. Which is actually what you would have done in the very early United States. In the 1780s and 90s, there's like Pennsylvania had its own money, New York has its own money. Are you kidding me? What's the exchange rate? And this is, when I was a student and I lived in Paris, this was the crazy thing. Like, you took your dollars and you changed them to French francs, which was always kind of like very, very pretty money. And then you'd go to West Germany and be like Deutsche Marks, and then like, oh my gosh, it was really confusing. And every time you did that, you lost something, right? Somebody took a cut. Well, here's a free trade zone, huge, and it was good for the economy. The Royal Road, as we mentioned, the postal service along it, and qanats. Yeah, this is pretty ingenious. How do you get your water to the field? There are not a lot of rivers. It's a very dry land. So I need water to farm. There's water in the hills, the Zagros Mountains, the snow is melting, there's water. How do I get water from there to here? Pipes. We call them pipes, they call them qanats, right? So water would be collected, and through gravity and increasingly more narrow pipes, it would be brought to your field. Now, the geometry of this had to be really, in the construction, really precise, right? That whole slope of a line stuff that you do in geometry or even statistics, right? Slope of a line, like, if it's too steep, it's going to flood a field. If if it's not enough of a pitch, what's it going to do? It's not going to go anywhere. Okay, it's not going to reach your field. I can even figure it out 2,500 years later. Okay, all right. There will be war. The Ionian Greeks will rebel about 2,500 years ago. Let's get back to the map since I'm not in my classroom. The Greeks living over here rebel against, they're just little tiny, they don't even show up on the map, like that little dot there. You're going to rebel against this empire? What are you thinking? Well, our cousins over here will help us. Yeah, but it's not going to be enough, right? So the Greeks living here did the one thing you're not allowed to do, right? Rebel against Persia. They got some assistance from their cousins, so to speak, on the other side of the water. Here's some money and some men and some ships. Darius is going to crush the rebellion. He's going to try to take Athens, actually. How dare you help the rebels? And this is well known in history. The Athenians were victorious at the Battle of Marathon, and the guy who ran back home saying, we won, we won. Oh, we won. He falls down, I suppose, when he got there. 2 miles? You runners who know this stuff. I'm not a runner, sorry, but 26 miles is a long. First marathon. What was his time? I don't know, nobody wrote. Darius is kind of satisfied. Put down rebellion, at least I taught those Athenians a lesson. And then the next ruler, Xerxes, less tolerant. Oh,